Spider-Man has some of the greatest costumes in comic book history. Today, we're breaking down 10 of Spider-Man's greatest looks. Number 1. The classic suit. This is the first costume Spider-Man ever wore in Amazing Fantasy number 15, illustrated by Steve Ditko. Spider-Man was one of the first superheroes to wear a full face mask to hide his secret identity. This suit would establish the iconic patterns and color scheme that would set the standard for everything after it. Number 2. The updated classic suit. Artist John Romita took over as Spider-Man artist in 1966. Romita made some small tweaks to the suit, removed the webbed underarms, made the webbing pattern wider, and changed the shape of the eyepieces. Number 3. The symbiote suit. This suit comes from an alien world and tries to form a symbiotic bond with Peter Parker. The alien suit enhances Spider-Man's powers, has its own webbing, and adds a fancy new spider symbol to his chest. Peter removed the suit when he discovered its sinister nature, and we all know how well that went. Is it too easy to make a killer fashion joke? Number 4. The armored suit. This suit was created by Peter Parker to fight a group of enemies called the New Enforcers. The silver-plated armor helped protect Spider-Man against enemy weapons, but also slowed down his agility. Number 5. The Scarlet Spider suit. This is the suit worn by Ben Reilly, a clone of Peter Parker. Ben's suit does away with the traditional webbing in favor of a solid red jumpsuit and blue hoodie. The suit also includes a set of exposed web shooters and utility belt. Number 6. The Iron Spider suit. This high-tech super suit was created by Tony Stark as a gift to Peter Parker. Tony incorporated the Iron Man color scheme of red and gold, along with mechanical arms, holographic display lenses, and gliding features. Number 7. The Future Foundation suit. Spider-Man got this new suit when he joined Reed Richards' Future Foundation after the disappearance of the Human Torch. This suit features a tech-inspired black and white design that matches the other members of the Future Foundation team. Number 8. The Stealth suit. Peter created this high-tech suit to combat the Hobgoblin's sonic screams. The suit warps sound and light around itself to make Spider-Man basically invisible. The suit is created with unstable molecules that also make it fireproof and self-repairing. Number 9. The Miles Morales suit. Miles Morales is a teenager with spider powers who took up the mantle of Spider-Man after the Peter Parker of his universe died in battle. Miles replaced the classic red and blue design with red and black to make the suit all his own. Number 10. The Superior Spider-Man suit. This suit was created by Dr. Octopus after he implanted his mind into Peter Parker's body. Otto became determined to carry out Spider-Man's legacy as the Superior Spider-Man and outfitted his suit with mechanical arms, retractable talons, and high-tech lenses which display tactical information. Well, there you have it. These are just a few of Spidey's incredible costumes over the years.
Never forget the time that I came up with Spider-Man as an idea, and I walked into our publisher at the time, and I said, I got this great idea for a new character. His name is Spider-Man, and he can stick to walls and swing on webs, and he's a teenager, and he has a lot of personal problems. And my publisher said, Stan, that is the worst idea I have ever heard. And he sent me out of the office that way. But I fooled him. I put Spider-Man in the issue of Amazing Fantasy, and it sold.
With great power, there must also come great responsibility. These words have defined one of the most iconic and enduring pop culture creations of all time, brought to life by the immortal words of Stan Lee and the legendary artistry of Steve Ditko. Spider-Man has been swinging from adventure to adventure for 60 amazing years. As a relatable teenager from Queens, Peter Parker has seen his fair share of challenges. Unimaginable tragedy, a most secret identity, lost love, a tarnished reputation, and villainy in all its sinister forms. But yet, he endures with an ever-expanding legacy. Join us as we hear from some of Marvel's most iconic and beloved creators as we celebrate the 60-year journey of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hello, Marvelites. Welcome to the virtual event Beyond Amazing, celebrating 60 years of Spider-Man, presented by Marvel Unlimited. I'm your host, Lorraine Sink, and I'm beyond excited to celebrate with you. A big welcome to all of you Marvel Unlimited subscribers and Marvel Insiders. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, now, we are completely live for this event, and we have the great honor of kicking off the 60th anniversary celebrations for one of the most beloved characters in comic book history. There is so much wonderful stuff to come tonight. And to kick it off with a bang, here is an exclusive Marvel Insider code for 20,000 points. Write it down. Only 5,000 people can redeem it. So don't miss out. Check it out also in the giveaways tab. You'll also have some Marvel Spider-Man trivia throughout the event, which you can answer in the polls tab over to your right. Plus, we'll have some spectacular giveaways. Check out the giveaways tab for more information on all of the items. We'll be drawing winners for our giveaways during the event, so keep an eye out for a direct message through this platform from one of our team. Maybe you won. Oh, and be sure to stick around until the end of the event for something extra amazing. Trust me, you'll love it. All right, tonight is just the beginning. Marvel will be celebrating 60 years of Spider-Man all year long. Follow along with the hashtag SpideyBeyondAmazing on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for more throughout the year. But hey, let's talk about today, because I'm going to be joined by some iconic Spider-Man creators. Together, we'll go through 4 different chapters of Spidey's story. First up, we'll have Beyond Sensational, discussing the origins of Spider-Man. Next up, we'll have Beyond Spectacular, delving into Spider-Man's design and visual impact. And then we will go Beyond Ultimate, swinging into the larger Spider-Verse, and then we're gonna go Beyond Amazing, scrying into Spider-Man's future. So, as I mentioned, we are live, so you can send along any questions you might have for our creators over in the Q&A tab, and I'll do my best to ask them. We've already gotten some great stuff from you folks that I get to ask tonight, so thank you so much for sending those along. And with that, it is time for our first group. Let's go beyond sensational with some special guests to give us insight into Spider-Man's creation and origins. Welcome to writer of Amazing Spider-Man from 1981 to 2012, including Kraven's Last Hunt and the new Ben Reilly Spider-Man series, J.M. DeMatteis. Hey, J.M.
Hey, how are you?
Good to have you. Former Spider-Man editor and former co-executive producer of the Spider-Man animated series, my old boss, Steve Wacker. Hi.
Hey, everybody.
And VP and executive editor, Tom Brevoort. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Lorraine, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you all for joining me. Now, we are going to be looking into the legacy of Spider-Man into the early days to his origins. For each of you, what personally was the most meaningful or impactful thing about those original Spider-Man comics from Stan Lee and Steve Ditko? JM, why don't you kick us off?
You know, the first Spider-Man comic I remember seeing was a really, really early one. And I was used to the finely sculpted, pristine, somewhat sterile comics from the Distinguished Competition. And I thought Spider-Man was a horror comic because I had never seen anything like Steve Ditko's work. Spider-Man, if you look at those old comics especially, is very creepy. And in fact, as a kid at that age, it was a little too creepy for me. So I had to kind of back away from it. I wasn't ready for it. But then a few years later, I jumped on right when John Romita took over the book, and then went back and reread all those original stories. But I think the essence of Spider-Man was right there in that first Romita story that I read, which is you had a huge story on one level with the Green Goblin, with Peter Parker, but the stakes weren't about the world. The stakes were all personal. It was about Peter Parker. It was about Norman Osborn. It was about Harry Osborn. It was about their families. And Spider-Man has always been a profoundly personal character, rooted in really emotional stories of some psychological depth. And that's what I responded to as a kid, and that's what I respond to as a writer.
Yeah, I really think we all do. Steve, how about you?
Boy, Mark, you're so right about those early stories being darker, I think, than sometimes people give them credit for. When I was editing the book, people all the time would say, we were going too dark on Spidey, and the criticisms. In my mind, I mean, there's a murder in the very first Spider-Man story, and it changes Peter's life in a dramatic way, and it haunted me a long time up through your work for sure. I think one of the things that resonated with me, beyond that, obviously his power set as a kid is just amazingly cool, and fun. And there are poses, there are Ditko and Romita poses that we all still make today that just are completely bound into the character. I think one of the things that really resonated with me with the book also was the fact that he was young, which was unusual for a hero not to be a teenager, but not to be a sidekick, was certainly different in 1962 with the rise of teens just as a demographic. But also the fact that his Aunt May was still around. She is such a key part of the story, and she sort of broke the paradigm of the parents are dead, and now our heroes have to go about their lives. Maybe they're inspired by the death. The fact that he had to take care of her is such a big part of the mythology to me.
So true. Who would Peter be without his Aunt May? Tom, what about you?
To me, particularly the early Spider-Man stories are the ones that really made me connect with the character. I grew up in the 70s, and in the 70s, Spider-Man was ubiquitous. He was kind of everywhere. The 67 cartoons ran on in afternoons all the time, and he was on the Electric Company and so forth. But it wasn't really until I read those early stories that I connected with the character. And it all kind of boils down to what is, I think, the essence of what makes Spider-Man work is Spider-Man was the first superhero who was the audience, that all the superheroes up to that point were, as JM said earlier, these fairly aspirational, finely chiseled, full-grown, upstanding citizens. And Peter Parker was just this stupid kid trying to make something good out of this weird accident that happened to him, and often lousing up in the way he did it, and it not being, just a blessing or a boon to him, or the thing that puts him over the top and makes everybody love him, but in fact that complicates his life and makes it more difficult. And speaking personally, I think it's no secret that if you gave me superpowers, I would be awful with them. I would just be bad at it. And Spider-Man was often bad at it, and that I think was very relatable.
I can greatly appreciate that in my heart. Now, Tom, as our resident know-it-all, you tend to just know all the things about comic history. I know whenever we have somewhere we need some help, we always turn to you. Could you lay a little context for us about sort of the landscape of comics before Spider-Man came into them, and what Steve Ditko and Stan Lee really did by introducing this character?
Tell us about the 50s and 60s, Tom.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Well, like we said earlier, in the world of 1962, by and large, superhero comics were fairly simple things, particularly after the rise of the Comics Code. Even seeing one superhero punch another guy's punch a villain was not done all that much. Most of the stories were sort of puzzle based. There'd be a challenge, there'd be a mystery, there'd be a question, there'd be a secret. There was a lot of running around, maintaining your secret identity, and not really doing a heck of a lot much more beyond that. And all of the characters, they were adults, they were beloved, and they were fairly thin as individuals. It's not like there was not any personality to a superhero's real identity or civilian identity, but there wasn't a whole lot. What Spider-Man did, and while there's a precedence for it in Fantastic Four, which came a little bit earlier, what Spider-Man really did better and more effectively than any other series of the time, and impacted and affected like everything that came after, was the story is not about Spider-Man. The story is about Peter Parker. And Peter Parker, the individual, is more important and is the focus of everything more than the superheroics. The civilian identity wasn't just something to set a character up in a place where he put on his costume and the rest of the story is about him battling whatever. You'd go through in issues of Spider-Man, early issues particularly, and Peter Parker would just be Peter Parker for like half the comic book. And that was seen as crazy. Like no kid's going to want to read about this guy, doing his laundry and being bothered by his bully and trying to scrape 2 nickels together to make the rent or whatever. But that was all the stuff that made people interested and care about Spider-Man and his problems and his struggles, and made him feel like much more of a real person than any superhero had been up to that point.
Well, I definitely think that we all feel a real kindredness with Peter Parker in particular, just as a person. And, JM, you probably know him better than anyone, as you spent so much time, writing Spider-Man, in the psyche of Spider-Man. What early stories really inspired your runs and your work with Spider-Man? And what is it like inside that head of his?
It's interesting. I was saying to somebody that I know Peter Parker and Ben Reilly better than I know some of my best friends, because I have lived inside their heads and I know every little demon that's crawling around in their psyches. My friends don't let me do that, So, at first as a reader and then as a writer, I've lived with this character my entire life. And I always say that, to follow up on what Tom said, these stories are always about Peter Parker, mask on or mask off. They're not Spider-Man stories. They're Peter Parker stories. And Peter, to me, in terms of mainstream comics, is the most psychologically real character that's ever emerged from mainstream comics. He doesn't put on a mask and become something other. He's always Peter. And another thing, to go back to what we talked about before, he was a working class kid too. As a working class kid from Brooklyn, I really related to that. He wasn't some rich guy, or he was just a kid whose family was struggling, and all these things. If you talk to any Spider-Man writer, I don't care what their ethnicity is, what their religion, what their background, we all feel like he's us, and it's a very unique thing for a character to be able to be that relatable to so many different people. If that answered your question, I don't know.
No, yes, it did. Thank you. Well, and it reminds me, he does have all of these troubles. He experiences death in his very first issue in Amazing Fantasy 15. But, we also fall in love with him because he has this fabulous sense of humor, and he's got jokes. He's got the fun, witty comebacks. And I'm curious for you, Steve, you spent a lot of time with Spidey as well.
Why don't you develop that in yourself, Steve?
Well, Steve is, as we know, Steve is my comedy guy. But why do you think that's so important, that both comedy and tragedy are such really important parts of Spider-Man?
Well, I guess comedy is the way we deal with tragedy. There's tragedy all around us every day. Tragedy happens no matter what. So you need the comedy to deal with it. I do think it was a key part of the character. One of the striking things about Spidey is that right away he is, as a superhero, more than any other hero until him, he is just super ostentatious and annoying and will land some decent jokes. I was, those early stories, I think it's the first issue where he meets the Fantastic Four and he just bugs the hell out of Ben Grimm. To the point where like Ben Grimm's destroying the Baxter building because he's so annoyed by Spider-Man. He just brings it out of people. Certainly is a trait Tom can recognize. But it is something I think that set him apart and is key to the character's longevity. If a writer can get on that book and actually land some solid jokes like Mr. DeMatteis did for a long time, it sort of elevates.
In Craven's Last Hunt, that hilarious story.
Hysterical. I read it with a laugh track. there's more to you than Craven's Last Hunt, my friend. I'm thinking Frogman and White Rabbit for one, among many others. But the ability to come in and show have a character like that is rare, and I think that's why it's attracted so much talent through the years.
I definitely think that everyone who gets an opportunity to work on Spider-Man feels like it is the biggest feather in their cap from everything that I've seen because he is such a beloved character. Now we have some fan questions here from our friends that are watching here right now. We have this one from Patrick in Canada for JM. Spectacular Spider-Man 200 is my favorite Spider-Man comic. When you kill a major character, what's that?
That's a good comic.
It is.
He's right.
When you kill a major character like Harry Osborn, do you need permission from the other Spidey writers, or can you just like kill him and the other writers go, "Oh, I guess he's dead now"?
You need you have to clear these things with every other writer, but you certainly need the permission of your editor. You know, in most cases, and I've killed off a few of these characters along the way. You know, and it's just, you know, you don't even play. It's not like you sit down. I didn't sit down 2 years before that when I launched that story and say I'm going to kill Harry. It was a natural evolution of the story, and my editor Danny Fingeroth understood that. The one time we had to really go up above was when it was time to kill Aunt May, and we had to get Stan's permission on that one because we couldn't do that without Stan's permission. But usually it's just between you and your editor, and if the other writers have complaints, they don't complain to me, they complain to the editor.
So that's these guys' problem. All right, we got it.
That's right. That's right.
All right, we've got, actually, I wanted to ask, you know, along those lines, you know, Jam, you're a very humble man, but Tom and Steve, what are your favorite runs of Mr. DeMatteis here? What are your favorite stories that he's worked on?
Well, I think that you know, the sequence that we just talked about, that whole Harry Osborn is the Goblin sequence that he did with Sal Buscema in Spectacular Spider-Man from, I guess it was in like the 170s, 180s, all the way up to 200. You know, all of that material is really great and really strong. Everybody on Earth will talk about Kraven's Last Hunt, and deservedly so. But you know, there was a lot more that Mark did on Spider-Man than that. Certainly, and you know, again, it's an era that's controversial. But during the days of the Clone Saga, I feel like he wrote the Spider-Man stories, both the Peter Parker stories and the Ben Reilly stories, in particular, in fleshing out the background of Ben Reilly, the lost years and the Spider-Man redemptions, that really gave that character depth and soul, where he could have just been an empty suit of tights and nobody would have cared about him. So that's an area that maybe and you know, obviously now you're back, you're doing more stuff with Ben Reilly today, and it's kind of nice.
Tom, you're answering every run. You're not leaving anything for me.
Yes,
we're just going to talk about Frogman anyway, Steve. So what's the difference?
That's true.
Yeah, I left.
Thank you, Tom. By the way, thank you.
The Kraven's Last Hunt, I think, is one of Marvel's perennials. It's one of the stories that everyone should read. It gets to the core of a couple different characters in a strong way. I don't know how it's not a movie yet, or a game, or a novel. I think it's a perfect comic. I'm more struck with that one by the timing of it, because it comes right on the heels of The Wedding. And as someone who was, I mean, if you're reading Spidey at the time, The Wedding alone was already came not completely out of the blue, but there wasn't a ton of lead up to it. And then the fact that story hits, I want to say the month after, and then right into Mad Dog War after that, it is a heck of a summer for Spider-Man comics.
Yeah, and a good job too of without you know, demeaning the people that came before. Kraven was just sort of he was a second string or third string Spider-Man villain. He'd been in a bunch of stories and the stories were fine, but nobody particularly cared about Kraven one way or the other until you got to Kraven's Last Hunt. And then he was dead and nobody could use him again, but everybody wanted to, because there suddenly was all this unforeseen, depth and internal life to this character that hadn't been explored, in the stuff that had come before. He was just a weirdo with a lion on his vest.
And the writing is just so precise and succinct, and it feels poetic. It feels like Walt Whitman's writing Spider-Man for 6 issues. It's really a great comic.
I got to send you both checks after this conversation.
All right. Well, I know I'm a huge fan. Thank you, I have to say, because I've read so many things of yours that I feel like have really hurt in the right way, where you're so caught up in the story that you're like, oh, my heart. So thank you for that. We're about to wrap up, but I want to throw some rapid fire questions at all of you to just give me a super quick answer, one word or one phrase, whatever comes to your mind first. All right.
Antelope.
Not yet, Tom. Not yet. Most sinister Spider-Man villain.
Oh,
Green Goblin. Green Goblin.
Depends which Green Goblin, doesn't it? The original
billing
Green Goblin. I'll go
department
with
of
the original
Forest
Green
Hills
Goblin because he
Hospital.
was creepy.
And Steve,
Yep,
what was yours?
The billing department of Forest Hills Hospital.
That might actually be the real answer. Greatest Spidey love interest. Tom, why don't you start us?
Gwen Stacy.
Jam?
Mary Jane.
Steve?
Carly Cooper.
Wow. Across the board. All right. Spider-Man in one word. Tom?
Gotta be amazing, right?
Steve?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Everyman.
Jam?
Human.
Also,
Indeed.
Schlemiel works.
It does. It does. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Thank you, Tom, Steve, and JM for chatting with us about Spider-Man's origins. And now let's enjoy a little bit of trivia with the fans. Before we welcome our next guest, I want to show you one of the awesome giveaways you'll have a chance to win today. 12 lucky folks will get one of these Funko Pop Marvel Beyond Amazing Spider-Man 2211 figures. This collectible series is exclusively available at Amazon. The series celebrates all kinds of versions of Spidey from both Marvel movies and comics. So expand your Marvel collection by grabbing the first figure in Funko's Marvel Beyond Amazing series, starting with this one now on Amazon, and then look out for new additional releases every other month. And of course, keep an eye out for a direct message from the Marvel team here on this platform to see if you've already won. You could be a winner right now. All right. Now it is time to go beyond spectacular. Few superhero costumes can rival Spider-Man's iconic design, but he has surely evolved through the years, from his traditional webbed red and blue suit, or was it supposed to be red and black, through all his various incarnations. These creators are some of the most iconic illustrators to bring Peter Parker's stories to life. So as always, feel free to drop your questions over in the Q&A tab if you have any for our creators. First up, we have artist and Marvel Entertainment's artistic director, Joe Quesada. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Amazing artist of Amazing Spider-Man since 2002, Humberto Ramos. Hey, Humberto.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. And artist of Amazing Spider-Man since 1977, including Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut and the Eisner Award-winning Coming Home from 2002, John Romita Jr. Hey, Johnny.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
We're great. All right, so I want to know, for each of you, what is the one thing that you find most distinctive about the design of Spider-Man and particularly drawing him? Joe, why don't you kick us off?
For me, it's always the eyes. It's always Spider-Man's eyes. They're so unbelievably expressive. And I think, considering if you put Spider-Man in historical context, the characters that were, popular at the time, it was incredibly unique. aspect to his costume, to his look, because he was able to emote through the mask. And I think that was the most revolutionary thing. I mean, you see little kids when they see that mask in particular, they freak out over it. There's just something about it. It's magnetic and it draws you in.
Absolutely. I mean, those eyes are iconic. What about you, Umberto?
I had to be agree with Joe. The eyes is the most iconic thing like I find in Spider-Man costume. I actually, I remember when I first start drawing Spider-Man, and I like drawing the chaining shapes in the on the eyes, and I remember having this friendly discussion with one of the most iconic artists in Spider-Man universe ever, and he told me, because he noticed that I did this one with the eyes, and he said, Spider-Man wears a mask, right? That you can't do that, I mean, and my answer to him was, well, we are actually drawing, funny books that they don't actually exist, and then happily, Marvel MCU happened, and they make me write, so I'm so happy for that.
I love that. What about you, Johnny?
The costume that I saw as a kid was embedded in my brain, and I was accepted. I accepted it as that, and couldn't change in any other way to me. And matter of fact, seeing different versions of the costume didn't throw me as much as I thought they would. I loved the costume, loved the way it was, but I remember the distinction about the character was the awkwardness and the way Steve Ditko and then subsequently John Romita Sr. would draw the character was, according to Stan Lee, this is a different type of a cat. He's not as graceful as other characters. He's awkward. And maybe the conversation about the fact that he was an awkward teenager might have played into it. But the bent legs and the awkwardness compared to a Daredevil per se. And recently somebody went to my son, literally a 25-year-old man, and said, your father draws Spider-Man with really curved legs. That's not right. And my son said, it's a comic book, just like Humberto said. My answer was, that was actually asked for by Stan Lee. It's a distinction. And that's the way I imagine the character and always will. The costume is designed beautifully, genius, but I accept it for the way it is because of what I saw when I was a young guy.
I love that. I love that so much. And yeah, it's comics. It's comics, people. Now, Joe, for you, obviously Steve Ditko has been instrumental in Spider-Man and that initial design. Could you talk a little bit about his style of drawing and how it has impacted the character of Spider-Man on the page?
Well, I think his style of drawing, I think it was said in the panel before us that, there's a creepiness to him that's kind of cool, right? There's a very, Johnny and I have talked about this a lot. There's a very, because we both, drawn Spider-Man and Daredevil, and there's a real big distinction between those two characters, even though they both, leap across rooftops and do kind of the same thing with the exception of sticking on walls and webbing. But Daredevil's more of a gymnast, right? And Spider-Man is just this sort of gangly, awkward, bendable kind of figure that is so fun to draw, but both of them take on different aspects. And that's what's fun about the Marvel universe, right? Is the fact that all these characters have their different attributes if you pay attention and do it right, which Johnny did. I did not. But yeah, there's just that. But I will admit that every time I have to draw Spider-Man in the traditional costume, which is also my favorite, I curse Steve Ditko because of that darn webbing. That webbing is just, it's so hard to draw, especially around the mask and neck area. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? When the mask has to meet the costume in the back of the mask. Oh, it's like a math problem. I hate math.
Yeah, allegedly, is it true Spider-Man is the most work to draw? That's kind of what I've heard unilaterally.
No, not for me. No, Iron Man. Yeah. Anybody metallic is hard.
Yeah, actually, Aunt May is a pain in the ass to draw, personally.
Poor Aunt May. Poor Aunt May. Actually, so Johnny, obviously you've had quite an epic legacy here with us over the last 40 years or so. You've been back and forth with Spider-Man, and now you're back once again. You couldn't stay away from Amazing Spider-Man #1 coming in April. We're thrilled to have you back. What keeps bringing you back to this character? I know it's in your blood, but what draws you back?
40 years, did you say? See, I did start when I was 2 years old. Just so you all know, I was drawing early. What draws me back to the character is this is selfish and I feel bad about this, but it reminds me of family. From the time my father drove my brother and I past a building and pointed and said, "That's where Peter Parker lives." And we were young enough not to understand, but the fact that Spider-Man lived near us, it felt like a family member. And then my father would discuss stories with us and tell us what Stan was doing this morning at the office to describe the plot, because there was no plot. It was a descriptive plot that my father would take notes on. It was so enveloping that there was more to the character than just the physical artwork of the character. It felt like a family member, and that's what I feel like. I think it's the greatest character. Now it's a reaction to another great character, but a better version. Listen, it was Superman. It's the antithesis to Superman. Newspaper, but and he's red and blue, but he's not perfect. He's imperfect. He gets the snot beat out of him occasionally. He gets a cold. He loses. His costume shrinks in the laundry. This is Stan's antithesis to Superman, and it's more than brilliant. And then to have us know that it was right near us. It was more than just the physical drawings that we saw. This was like a family member. So I feel the same way about wanting to do the character. When I'm asked what I wanted to do coming back to Marvel, I'm sorry, I have to do that character. It's a brilliant character. One of the greatest. It's the greatest character of all time. I can't help it.
I have to agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why we're all here tonight, right? Because we love Spider-Man. He is all of us in so many ways. Now, Umberto, you have had a lot of time with Spider-Man. The last decade or so, you've been on Amazing Spider-Man. You've had 20 years of drawing Spider-Man in different iterations. And to that point, you've gotten to design some Spider-Man, some great looks for Peter Parker, and particularly one for Doc Ock when he was the Superior Spider-Man.
Yeah.
For you, what do you think goes into designing a really, truly great Spider-Man costume when you're not drawing that original?
Well, it's hard. When I was asked to redesign Spider-Man costumes every once in a while, I did the Super Spider-Man ones, and then I did the stealth Spider-Man, the black and green one. But also I have to remember that there's a legacy that I have to respect. I can move forward a little bit or aside from a little bit from the original costume, but I know, or I don't want to move that far away from it. So when I had the chance to redesign the Superior Spider-Man costume, that to me I think it's one of the best things I've really drawn regarding costumes, and that I went back to some designs that I've seen before I remember this Alex Ross costume he once did for, I think it was for a movie or something, and they never ended up using it, and to me it was a great design that I had to take from, and the black eyes and the uneven webbing, that to me stays again close from the original costume, but far away enough to let us know that this is not the Peter Parker we know, but it's something creepy happening, going on with this new Peter. So to me, it's a lot of fun. It's what can I say? It's my dream job to be able to draw as my day job the hero that I grew up with. So to me, it's all my my really golden dream come true.
Hey, listen, this is better than having a real job doing this. I got to tell you, this is a lot of fun.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it sure is. So we have some great questions here from fans that I'm going to read off for you. From Kyle in Virginia, he would like to know, for each of you, what is your favorite Spider-Man costume and why? Joe, why don't we kick off with you?
The original Ditko, where it was black and red. You know, I'm a black and red guy. I don't care what people say. I personally believe that's what it is. And you know, it's really fun. And this is no slight to Humberto or anybody who's ever, you know, I've done redesigns of costumes for Marvel and stuff. But it's funny because with every redesign, it's like, oh, that's cool. It's a cool, interesting take. And you go, original's still the best ever. It's still the best ever, you know?
Heck yeah. What about you, Johnny?
I can't disagree with that. But I have a specific reason. I remember the first time I saw Steve Ditko black out the blue part of the costume, and where you only saw the webbing in a moody panel, and I was locked in. There are great iterations to the costume, brilliant costume designs. But I remember distinctly before I don't remember how old I was, but seeing Steve Ditko do that image stuck in my head, and I use it as often as I steal it as often as I can. Rest in peace, Steve. Brilliant. My father stole that and used that idea, and not because he was told to use it, because it's artistically brilliant. That's that costume, and I can't stop thinking about it that way.
Heck yeah. What about you, Humberto?
The red and blue. I mean, to me, it's not only the best Spider-Man costume, you know, ever. You know, I know a lot of people like the black costume and that, but to me, it's not all, you know, not only the best Spider-Man costume, but every superhero ever drawn costume. You know, the best one is the red and blue on Spider-Man. I love it. I grew up with it, and you know, as a kid, when you grew up reading these books, the thing about this guy, you can't see any of his body under the costume, and you can relate to that because it can be you. You know, like they say in the books and in the movies now. You know, it creates a bond, and it's so beautifully designed that, as Joe said, you know, you can try improve something, you know, every once in a while, but still you go back to the original design because it's so good. It's perfect. It's perfect.
I have a question for Joe. Is there any truth to the rumor that Kirby did a preliminary design of the costume before?
You know, I have no idea. That's really more of a question for Tom Brevoort, who was on before us. You know what I mean? I don't know. If he did, I've never seen anything.
I just hear that. No. I heard that rumor before, and I may have seen sketches. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Everybody was in the same office from time to time, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if Stan just said, "Hey, Jack, you know, what do you got?" You know, and then but Steve's got his thing, you know. And again, I mean, Ditko could have done that costume and not done. He just come in the red, right, with the black. And why the webbing? The webbing, man, he's killing me.
Yeah.
Just to tire out your fingers there. We have a question here from Lee in Florida who would like to know, do you have any tips for drawing Spider-Man or Spider-Man characters? And which Spider-Man character do you most enjoy drawing? Humberto, why don't you kick us off?
Well, you know, my tip is have fun. I mean, again, it's a lot of work, and to me, you know, the technique on drawing characters, you know, everybody has a different approach to that. But to me, the thing about drawing Spider-Man and Spider-Man universe's characters is to sit down, have fun, and enjoy the ride. So I would say that. I mean, that's the way I've been doing it for the last 20 years, as you said, and still it's thrilling, you know, to wake up every morning knowing that I'm gonna have to draw a Spider-Man page and bring to people these characters, you know. So to me that would be it. And to me, my favorite character to draw in the Spider-Man universe, I don't know. I like the Green Goblin a lot, honestly. I enjoy drawing him a lot with this crazy, you know, eyes and smile, and you know, I like him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that craggy face. I love it.
Yeah.
What about you, Johnny?
What was the original first question? It was not just the character.
Any tips for drawing spider characters, and which is your favorite to draw?
The tip for drawing Spider-Man is to be different and do it differently, because that's the character. There's so much difference in him. Normal kid, a mess up kid that just he made mistakes, and he made mistakes as a superhero. Again, when the costume shrunk in those early issues, come on, that's brilliant. And then he gets beat up and he gets a cold and his aunt yells at him. That's what the familiarity was. That's what everybody loved about the character. And that's what makes you enjoy the character more, drawing it, because you draw your, for instance, when I would put him in a room, I would put stuff in my room, in Peter Parker's room, because it looked familiar. Stan Lee once said the balance of fantasy and reality is what makes characters great. He said, you could do 80% reality and you pine for some of the fantasy. And then the reverse is also true. When you have a fantastic out of space type of character, you get 80% fantasy and you want a little bit of that reality. Well, with Spider-Man, it's 20% fantasy and 80% reality, but it's the streets of New York where I grew up, Joe grew up. That's putting that in the character is what made the thrill to me. And my favorite character to draw is Mary Jane Watson. There was just something about reading that page, that last page that my father drew. Sorry, I'm a little bit selfish here, but that image of Mary Jane Watson appearing, love drawing that character. Love it, love it, love it. Villain's different, but love drawing that character.
Oh, the best. And what about you, Joe?
My tip for anybody who wants to draw Spider-Man, who's breaking in and really wants to, is just forget don't use photo reference. Don't use photo. You cannot get anyone to pose in a proper Spider-Man pose, but you have to understand anatomy, because it's when you look at a Spider-Man drawing, the way that Johnny or Roberto draw Spider-Man, I mean, joints are dislocated, but they still look like they're connected. They still look like they're plausible. You're catching him in motion. Johnny and I have talked about this at length, that when I was a fan reading Johnny's stuff, yes, Johnny, you are older than me.
That goes my whole night right there.
I was a fan reading Johnny's stuff. I remember in college, I did an animation class, and they were talking about the great Disney animators and how all these animators had an athletic streak through them. They were all good at athletics of some form, whether it was playing baseball or whatever it may be. And that's what made them really understand and it's the fluidity of motion and how characters moved in space. And I realized that was also true in comic books. And I remember reading Johnny's stuff, and I'm like, I bet you this guy played baseball. I could tell by the way the Spider-Man moved, the way the Daredevil moved. They ran, when they ran across the rooftop, you could feel the athleticism. And then later on, we became friends and we discussed this, and it turns out to be true. And by that, I don't mean you have to be a great athlete. I just mean that you have to understand physicality. And I think when you don't, then Spider-Man comes out stiff and sometimes he could look dislocated. Todd McFarlane is a great example of this, right? Todd played baseball. Todd understands athletics, and he was able to bend and twist Spider-Man in insane ways and yet still make it feel like, I think that could happen. It can't. It really can't. Like the eyes, it can't happen. But he made it. He made you believe that. So that's my tip.
And who is your favorite to draw?
Oh, my favorite villain, man.
Or just your favorite character to draw?
Oh, my favorite. Well, I like drawing.
Of the Spider-Verse, of course.
You know what? He's not part of the Spider-Verse, but I put him in the Spider. I did a story with him, and I love drawing Doctor Strange with Spider-Man. Just something about that.
Ditko's version was fantastic.
Yep, there's both Ditko characters, the commonality, and very different from each other, but both do this kind of thing, right? So,
good point.
It all flips back around. I would love to listen to you guys tell stories all day long, but I have to release you soon. So let's hit some rapid fire questions. I'm going to throw out a question. You give me your quick answer right off the top of the head, and let's do it. First up, best Spider-Man side character to draw, Joe.
I missed that. Best what?
Best side character to draw from Spider-Man.
Side? You mean like supporting character?
Yeah, like a supporting character.
Oh, Mary Jane, hands down.
Umberto?
Mary Jane.
Johnny?
Mary Jane, and that character is iconic, and it's more than just the vanilla of Gwen. This is a typical, strong, spectacular character, and the way she was created with the history of the character never showing her before, and then the splash, it sticks in your mind, and she's beautiful. I love drawing the character. with the
Absolutely.
red bangs. Something about the red bangs over the forehead there, darling.
You know what? Listen, I'm here hosting tonight for a reason. I know it.
There you go.
I've ended up in this career for a reason, and I know it. It had an impact, I'll tell you. All right, most influential Spider-Man artist to each of you. Umberto.
This is really hard. Well, I have a long list. I can't say just one, but two of them are actually, it's me being lucky today because I'm with these guys. I
Thank you.
admire
That's
them
beautiful.
both.
I don't
love
buy
their
it for a
work.
second, but that's
I
beautiful.
always have, and I always will. So my personal list is long, but surely it includes these two guys. So thank you.
That's nice.
For inspiring me.
We'll take
Thank
it.
you, Roberto.
Joe.
As much as Ditko originated all of this stuff, in visually in the Spider-Man universe, Johnny's dad, Mr. Senior Romita, is hands down. He took Spider-Man and made him an icon, visually, right? He took his knowledge of romance comics, and because Spider-Man is, it's got all that drama of romance comics, and he just brought it to life, So to me, there is no one. And I'm sorry, Johnny, you're number 2 on my list, John. You're number 2, but your dad was hands down the greatest Spider-Man artist in the history of Spider-Man.
And now,
nice.
Johnny, your turn.
It's more than just the Spider-Man stuff that my father did. It enveloped all art because I watched him draw from the moment. Every time I had a monster under my bed, I would go run up into the attic and I would watch him draw all night long. But when he did the first Daredevil cover, I became attached to comic books, and then he went over to Spider-Man. It sat with me for so long because it was more than just a comic book. It was the whole city to me. But his art, to me, I even looked at the stuff when he was doing romance comics. He did stuff that he said was based on Leonard Starr's artwork, which was newspaper strip stuff, the beautiful romance stuff. But when he did Spider-Man, it sung to me, and everything he did, I wanted to be like. Unfortunately, in my head, it started out looking like his stuff. By the time it got down to my hand, it was just mine, and it sucked. But my father has influenced me as an artist more on Spider-Man than others, but here it is.
There it is. Oh, thank you all so much for talking.
He's the GOAT.
The GOAT. Thank
Yeah.
you to Joe, Johnny, and Umberto. Thank you so much for talking with me. And now we're going to watch a little bit of trivia.
Pleasure to be on the same panel with you two guys. Thanks.
Thank you, too.
welcome our next round of guests, I need to tell you about our next giveaway. All right, 12 lucky folks will get a Spider-Man Marvel Legends retro figure from Hasbro. All right, we have 6 Hasbro Marvel Legends series of Spider-Man 2099, aka Miguel O'Hara, there you see him, and we have 6 Hasbro Marvel Legends series of Marvel's Sandman, aka William Baker. These figures are all 6-inch scale and feature premium design, detail, and articulation for posing and display, and they are a great addition to any Marvel figure collection. And of course, do not forget to check your direct messages here on the platform to see if you're already a winner. You could have won just now. How about that? All right. Now let's go beyond Ultimate. Over the course of the last 2 decades, the Spider-Verse has grown exponentially. With the creation of the Ultimate Spider-Man, the path was laid for new icons like Miles Morales, and now the larger multiverse of webbed warriors that each carry the notion in their own way. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. To help us talk about Peter Parker's legacy and how it's gone beyond the friendly neighborhood to a vast Spider-Verse, let's welcome some special guests. And of course, feel free to drop any questions you might have over in the Q&A tab as we welcome our creators. First up, Amazing Spider-Man writer from 2008 to 2018 and creator of the Spider-Verse, Dan Slott. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Lorraine.
Spider-Woman writer, Carla Pacheco. Hey.
Hello.
And Silk writer, Maureen Gu. Hello, Maureen.
Hello.
I already know you guys are my troublemaker group, and I'm here for it. I'm so excited for it.
No.
We're your first group of all writers.
Yeah.
Love talking.
Of course, we're the troublemakers.
Exactly. All right. Now, I want to know for each of you. Now, spider powers obviously are an important part of any spider character, but what do you think makes a truly great spider character? What are the attributes? Dan, why don't you kick us off?
Goofing up. Every spider character needs to goof up. Other superheroes can do everything perfectly and have cap teeth and stand arms akimbo, but your spider characters really foul things up and then have to fix it. That's what's fun. They're like you and me. They screw up all the time.
See, troublemakers. All right. And what about you, Maureen?
I think that, for me, what stands out is their heart. They have a lot of heart in everything they do, whether or not that leads to good decisions or bad decisions. I do think that it's always their compass. And I find that really appealing about all of them.
Absolutely. Hand in hand. And what about for you, Carla?
Definitely probably like the combination of both Dan and Maureen's answers where definitely I love the screw ups. But there is, at the end of the day, there is a big heart to them of they feel bad about the screw ups, just not bad enough to stop screwing up. And I think that is something that's very human and very relatable just about the Spidey characters in general is, they're the most fallible in ways, and while also being normal, if that makes sense. It's a normal kind of fallible, and I think that's why the character has endured for so long.
It definitely makes me feel better about my day, just knowing that like Peter Parker luck is around and it happens to everybody. Now, we, of course, are talking about the Spider-Verse, and Dan, the Spider-Verse title was ya baby. It was, you were co-creator of Spider-Verse, and obviously there's an illustrious history from Ultimate Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse's origins. So what inspired you to write Spider-Verse, and where were you pulling your ideas from the greater lore?
I got hired to write a video game from a company called Beenox called Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. And I went out to Quebec and they showed me the game that I was going to have to write the story about. And it featured 4 different versions of Spider-Man, 1 Miguel O'Hara and 3 Peter Parkers. And it bugged me that the mechanics of the game, that they didn't get to team up. Because it's a 1-player game, so you're just once, and I was the only guy who got to put them together in the cutscenes. And when I saw that, I called my editor, Steve Wacker. I called him from Quebec and I went, we've got to do this in the comic, but we have to do what they can't do. We have to use every Spider-Man ever. Like, I just don't want to use all the different Peter Parkers. I want to do like Spider-Ham. I want like all these guys all getting together and having some big bleeping adventure all together. And Steve was like, let's do it. And that was it. That's where Spider-Verse came from.
And now we have all of the Spideys. You've so kindly pulled them all together for us. Another wonderful character that came out of that run that you did on Amazing Spider-Man is Silk, now in the hands of Maureen Gu, here with us tonight. Yeah, in the square, right? Which one of these ways? But, Maureen, you have an interesting, like so many comic writers before you, taking the legacy of a character created and exploring their story in your own way. What about Cindy Moon? Were you interested in exploring? And, what makes her her own distinct Spider character?
Yeah, Cindy, appeals to me on so many levels, but I really loved how her origin story started with a lot of trauma, and then she literally works through that trauma on the page by going to therapy, which, I'm going to freely admit here that I don't read a ton of comics, but I have never seen that in comics before. Seeing a character, superhero, have to go to therapy to figure out all their stuff, because all superheroes have so much baggage, a lot of mental health issues. So I really love that she worked out her trauma on the page. I really wanted to keep exploring that. I think her emotional growth was something I really wanted to focus on, because, a lot of her earlier stories are her dealing with all the kind of messed up stuff that she went through, living in a bunker for 10 years, losing her parents or finding them again, all this stuff, and her brother. So I just thought, okay, I kind of want to see where all this therapy and working on her stuff takes her. And so I really love that. I also felt like, Silk, Cindy, is Korean American, which is kind of amazing. I never thought as a kid I would ever read a Korean American superhero and a woman. And living in my favorite world of Spidey stuff, because Spider-Man was my favorite comic book character growing up. So I really loved the idea of kind of exploring her Korean American side in a very subtle way, which is how I write my books. My books also have Korean American characters, but it's not really about identity. It's just that their identity is a part of who they are and everything they do, just like all of us, whatever we've been raised in is indelibly a part of us. So I really liked the idea of being able to infuse Cindy with all this Korean American stuff in a way that was not the focus of her story.
And I love your use of her brother and supporting characters, and it's so delightful. Now, Carla, I have to say, you write a heck of a villain for Spider-Woman. Shout out to Octavia Vermis and her dinosaur mouth.
Chonky. Yeah, it's like we've had too many cute little anti-heroes, so now I need like Jeff the Land Shark, or he's a hero now, but no, I needed an adorable terrible villain, so now we have Chonky, the emotional support baby hippo ankylosaurus that Perez and I decided definitely needed to be in the comics now. So now we have Chonky.
Yeah. But this brings me to what makes a great spider villain besides great teeth?
I mean, I think what's fun is obviously I can only speak for the villains that I've created where, as far as me making them, is I enjoy just making straight up bad people. And I think with Spidey villains, you do have that opportunity to just, you don't necessarily need to have a really rich backstory for the villain. I mean, you can, and it's great, but you can also just have someone be evil and terrible, and it's fun. And that's kind of what I enjoy doing. And with the Spidey characters, it's like I got to have Spider-Man face off with Star in one of the annuals this past year, and that was fun because like there's no one like Spider-Man who can go head to head with someone who's just flat out terrible and just have fun with it. And that's the best part about writing Spider-Man is you can really just kind of dig into just some really reprehensible people, but it's fun. And I think that's it's always about it being fun, in my opinion.
Well, when she screams about co-pays, though, I was like, I'm with you. I fully understand your villain journey.
See, that was funny. Maureen just mentioning, it's like, oh, Silk going to therapy. I was like, I had Star go to therapy, but then she kind of blew up the therapist's office, so it didn't really stick.
As one would.
I mean, the co-pays are brutal, man. Brutal.
All right, we have some great fan questions here for you folks. From Aaron in Florida, who is your favorite alternate universe Spider person? So none of you can choose your own Spidey. You have to choose somebody from outside of the 616. Maureen, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, Dan already or you might have mentioned, Dan mentioned Spider-Ham. I mean, I love, come on, when I first heard his name was Peter Porker. I don't know. I love a good pun. It's so silly. It's so outrageous. So I was like, okay, I don't know much about, again, sorry, I'm not, I'm going to be the person that's like the layman's comic person here. So I know like the most basic stuff, but I died when I heard Peter Porker.
The best thing about him that makes him unique more than any other spider character, everyone's bitten by a radioactive spider. He's a spider that was bitten by a radioactive pig.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
And that radioactive pig was his Aunt May. That was like
what? But then also, why is he still a spider then? Why?
Oh no. Well, the Aunt May of that world was using a radioactive hairdryer, and it irradiated her, and then she bit the spider, and then it grew into the thing, and then she just took it as her child.
As you do.
As one would.
Obviously. If you live in an all-animal sort of cartoon universe, why not?
Yeah.
His best enemy is Moose Stereo. Which is just brilliant.
Wait, so then Dan, is Spider-Ham your favorite alternate universe Spidey?
My favorite alternate universe Spidey is one that I lucked into when I was working on Spider-Verse with Olivier Coipel. We described this character we needed, Spider UK. And Olivier and it was in the plot that he had a mixture of a Captain Britain and Spider-Man costume with a big Union Jack on it, and which we'd fill with webbing. And when Olivier drew it, in his mind, Spider UK meant punk. So he drew the character we know as Spider-Punk. And I get the art, and I'm like, because I told him to go crazy, and if you wanted to add any extra spiders in the background, feel free, and I'll roll with it. And I was looking, I needed to script Spider UK, and I couldn't find him on any of the panels. And I was like, Olivier, where's Spider UK? And he's like, oh, that's him. That's the punk. And I'm like, no, we need him in the story, Olivier. I can't. and we pleaded with him and got him to do patches to lift Spider-Punk out of the art and to draw in the Spider UK. And he was devastated. So I promised him, I'm like, I love the design for Spider-Punk. I'll bring him in the next issue. I'll make him a major character. You'll get to draw him again, I promise. Well, and he was like, okay. And the next time he was introduced, you're supposed to see Superior Spider-Man, and I gave him 2 henchmen that were alternate spiders, and one was Spider-Punk. But Olivier was just so happy that he made Spider-Punk the biggest character on the page. And because
We have Hobie Brown because you let Olivier Coipel just go wild.
Yeah, and I'm like, you know what? We'll just run with it. And now because of that, because he was the happy accident, he's my favorite alternate Spider-Man. I love Spider-Punk.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Carla, do you have a favorite alternate Spidey?
I mean, I was going to say Spider-Ham too, but now it's Spider-Punk because of the story. Like, that's awesome.
All right. Next up, we've got a question from Randy in California. When any of you were offered to take on the role of working on these stories of, such prolific characters, did you view it as daunting or as an exciting opportunity? Maureen, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. It was both in equal parts, I think. Daunting because I don't have a comics background. This was my first comic. And not only a comic, but a Marvel. I just know the fans are so passionate, right? So I wanted to do right by them. And then it's Marvel, so it's also like daunting because it's like, wow, okay, kind of a big name. People know Marvel comics, but I was so excited. I've always actually wanted to delve into comics. It wasn't just like a random thing that came into my lap, and I was like, oh, I've never considered this. Even though I don't have comics background, I know a ton of people who work in comics. It's always been kind of a background part of my life, creative life. I consumed comics as a kid. I watched, we watched the X-Men cartoons in the green room. We were talking about that. I thought I was like the only, I'm like, oh no, I'm like the only like I watched X-Men and that's how I got into comics.
And now you just found out you're basic.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm a basic comic.
No, you are universal.
There's
basic.
Universal. Universal.
Basic.
Not basic, universal. Yeah.
I just got a really great question from one of our fans here, from Alan D, and I have to ask it before we run out of time, which is, if THWIP was banned, what onomatopoeia would you use instead?
Sheep.
Ooh.
Sheep?
Sheep. Like a sheep.
I would probably make it like WEHHB. Like it would just say.
Oh, that's nice. Nice.
Like,
I appreciate that.
Like.
Oh,
yeah, just that.
Yeah.
Solid.
I mean, yeah. Like.
I love you guys.
Much shorter, quicker.
A thwomp.
Well, that's like when it splats into something, but kind of you have a thwomp, the fit,
yep.
and then the sheesh, like if it's going through water.
I had a lot of help on those. That was all my editors, Lindsay and Jake, thought of all of them because I would never include it in my, I'm like, whatever, the comic-y thing is happening right now, the fighting.
Oh,
thing.
no. The onomatopoeia is my favorite part of writing any spider character, especially, but mine tend to be more like what Dan said, like web. I have Spider-Woman kicking someone off a plane, and the sound effect is foot. So
love it.
Then Travis makes it look pretty.
As just like somebody who grew up always loving Spider-Man, anytime you get to hit a big beat, it's just the happiest moment. Writing out THWIP makes me happy.
Yeah.
I don't want to think of a THWIP-less world, Lorraine.
No, I would never ask you to omit THWIP from your vocabulary. Far be it from me.
But
now,
isn't
Carla,
it great that all your guys spell check? It flies by now.
Oh gosh, mine is. I spend so much time trying to figure out like if the THWIP needs like 3 eyes or 2, depending on like how far it's going. It's like, okay, should it be THWIP or should it go like THWIP or
when you're in the middle of that, when you're like adding that 4th eye, is there ever that part of your brain that goes like, they're paying me to do this?
I mean, they're not paying us a lot.
No,
all right, it's time for some rapid fire questions.
I love you, Marvel.
All right. We're running out of time, so I want to do a few rapid fire questions with you folks before we release you out into the wild. So I'm going to give you a quick question and then tell me the first word or phrase that comes off the top of your head, and we'll speed through them. Which spider character has the coolest costume? Carla.
Spider-Woman.
Obviously. Maureen.
Silk.
Obviously. Dan.
Either the original Spider-Man or Spider-Gwen. That's an amazing costume.
Spider-Gwen's cool. Her hood.
It is so good. What is the best Spidey not from Earth 616? I think we covered this a little bit, so I'm going to skip to the next one. One word to describe each character. Miles Morales. Dan.
That's Morales. Sarah.
Sarah. Carla.
Cool.
He is very
That's
cool.
funny because I was going to call him a dweeb.
Oh, well,
and that's what makes him a Spidey.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. He's very cool to some people and a nerd to others. So
I want to change my vote to young.
And last but not least, Spider Ham. Dan.
Oh man, Porker.
Carla.
So bad when you just say it out loud.
Puns.
Puns, very good. Maureen.
Delicious.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm changing
He's in
my vote
danger
to
at
kosher.
Maureen's. Okay, well, I'm about to let you go, but first, Maureen, I heard you have some exciting news to share with the class. What is it?
Okay, my news is that this Marvel Legends Silk 6-inch figure will be available for pre-order tomorrow, March 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern as part of a special Spider-Man Beyond Amazing item available exclusively at Amazon.com. So she's going to be in a little doll form.
Yeah.
Do we get to see it, Lorraine? Do we get to see it now?
Well, yeah, it's on the screen, Dan.
It's on the screen.
It is?
Wait,
It is on the screen for the fans at home. And of course, it's going to come in a Marvel Legends.
Can they still see us?
They will. It also is going to come in a Marvel Legends 2-pack along with Doc Ock. So go pre-order tomorrow over on Amazon if you want to get your own Silk figure. We love her. I love you guys. Thank you for being so wonderful. Thank you, Maureen, Carla, and Dan. You guys crack me up, and we had the most fun. And now let's enjoy a little bit of trivia. You know what time it is. It's giveaway time. So as a special thank you to everyone attending, you are all receiving an exclusive NFT digital comic of Amazing Spider-Man number 130 from our partner Vivi. The issue features the first appearance of Spider-Man's greatest and most revered mode of transportation, the amazing, the spectacular, the Spider-Mobile. This NFT is limited to just 5,000 copies, and it's only being made available to you folks here for this event. Look out for an email tomorrow with info on how to redeem. Enjoy it. But I am not done with the giveaways yet. We have several amazing books we are also giving away. First up, one lucky person is going to get an edition of Spider-Man Volume 1, 1962 to 1964, published by Taschen and featuring the first 21 Spidey stories in gorgeous detail. This is a huge book. I love it. 3 people will win a copy of the second volume in Folio Society's acclaimed Marvel Hero series, Spider-Man. The book collects 12 action-filled tales and includes a complete replica of the Amazing Spider-Man number 1 And we are giving away one hardback and one paperback of the Amazing Spider-Man from the Penguin Classics Marvel collection, which will not hit shelves until June of this year. It contains 12 key stories from the first 2 years of Spider-Man's publication history. So go check your direct messages on the platform here and see if you are a winner. Wow, there is so much good stuff. All right, we've already heard so many great stories throughout the show, and that was great, but it's in the past. So let's look to the future as we go beyond amazing. As I mentioned, Spidey's 60th anniversary celebration is happening throughout 2022, and these folks, they know all of the secrets. So as always, feel free to go drop your questions in the Q&A tab as we welcome our guests. First up, we have Marvel Comics Editor-in-Chief, CB Cebulski. Hey, CB.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Lorraine. Thanks for letting us join.
Of course, and VP and Spider-Man Executive Editor, Nick Lowe. Hey, Nick.
Hey, webheads. So good to see you. Hey, Lorraine. Hey, CB. How we doing there?
Now, Nick, you're very formal this evening. I'm loving it.
Was it not the dress code? They told me it was formal. Wait a second. You guys aren't wearing, enough of this. Enough of this. Got to get rid of this nonsense. Luckily, I'm dressed for anything. So I got my Spidey shirt on here so I can stand up. Oh, yeah.
He wears it under every shirt.
Yep. Every day. Got to wear my Spider undershirt.
No, you've got to be prepared. There. Now I feel like we are ready to talk Spidey. All right. Yeah. Now there are a ton of great announcements that have already come out about what is in store for this year for Spider-Man, but let's talk about some of these. So first up, Amazing Spider-Man #1 coming this April. What can you tell us about it?
Boy, oh boy, there's so much to say and so much we don't want to reveal to the fans, huh, Nick? I mean,
oh my gosh.
I mean, the last 6 months, year and a half, Spider-Man, everything's been just simply amazing, to use the appropriate term. But, especially the last 19 issues, what Zeb and Jed, Kelly and Saladin have been doing, with all their collaborative partners and Beyond, Spider-Man Beyond, have been building to this. And I know we want to stay secret, not give away too much, but do you want to let folks in on a little bit of the fun?
Absolutely. I'm the luckiest Spider editor in the world, because next month, for Amazing Spider-Man #1, I have Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr., who you just saw talking earlier. He's still the greatest. We have so many surprises up our sleeve, so much amazing stuff going on in there. Such Peter Parker pushed to the limit, big secrets laid down, giant reveals, the best villains of all time. It is going to be a story that you're going to remember for the rest of your Spider-Man days.
Well, speaking of stories we're going to remember for our Spider-Man days, there's another big milestone coming up, Amazing Spider-Man #900. What's going on with 900?
Nick, 900? Didn't we just 900? Do 700, 800? Are we at 900 already?
Fast.
We just did 850 like yesterday, it feels like. We're already at, I better get going. Wait a second. No, I do remember. We are pulling out all the stops this year with Amazing Spider-Man 900. It falls in Spidey's true 60th anniversary month of June, because I think we all know that Amazing Fantasy #15 came out on June 5th in 1962. But we've got Zeb Wells, of course, our Amazing Spider-Man writer. He's being joined by living legend Ed McGuinness. They have an epic story. You're basically, when you pick up the comic book of Amazing Spider-Man 900, you're getting a Spidey graphic novel with some bonuses by Zeb and Ed, and it is so good. So many classic bits with some new bits too. Like, what is the Sinister Adaptoid? What does Doc Ock have to do with this? What do all these villains have to do with this? What is Spidey the 7th part of the Sinister group? Is he the Sinister 7? What is happening? CB, what is happening? How are you letting us do this?
I don't know. There can never be enough Spider-Man. There can never be enough craziness. And you guys have all been doing such an amazing job of telling the tales of Peter and company. The more, the merrier, right?
Oh my gosh. I think that.
I have more questions than when we started, all because of Nick Lowe. Now we're also going to have a new title, Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man #1. What's in store with that?
Deadly Neighborhood is a series that's coming out that's extremely special to me in many ways. Not only do I love the creative team of Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas and B. Earl, who've done some amazing stories with us so far at Marvel. This is them taking everything to the next level, really busting out and, doing a super big Spidey story. It's also going to star, and I think we've revealed this a little bit, Nick. Forgive me if I'm
no, go for
giving
it.
away any
Go for
secrets,
it.
but it's with the Demon Bear from the New Mutants, from X-Men continuity. I grew up loving the New Mutants, Danny Moonstar, especially what Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz did on that run. And here we're able to combine. It's like peanut butter and chocolate. It's Spider-Man and the New Mutants. It's going to be a fantastic story that I think is going to knock people's socks off. Nick, I don't want to add too much more, I know, but
yep. The book is shaping up so nicely. Like CB said, we got Taboo and B. Earl writing, and we got Juan Ferreira on art. Juan, who just finished, as you Marvel Unlimited readers know, the spine-tingling Spider-Man, which is, again, one of the creepiest, most amazing Spider-Man stories ever, exclusively on Marvel Unlimited. You guys have to follow Juan Ferreira over to Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It is a freaky book. It is a scary book. It takes, one of the scariest things is it takes Spidey out to LA. Think of the traffic. What are we going to do?
How is he going to swing on those short buildings?
Exactly. Right. But we've got some ideas for how to do that. We've got Raza on the covers as well. This book is going to be maybe the coolest Spider-Man book of all time. I'm so excited for people to get to experience that in this 60th year of Spider-Man.
Heck yeah.
And
well,
Nick,
also,
I know you brought up spine-tingling Spider-Man, but the behind-the-scenes Easter egg there is that theme song.
by Nick Lowe on the vocals there.
Oh my gosh, when Saladin turned in that first script and it had the song, I knew I had to do something with it. So I put together a tune to his amazing, creepy lyrics, and I freaked my own kids out with it. Like my daughter, she was like, please don't sing that song again, please.
That just meant you're doing it right. You're doing it right.
I'm working on comics right, but I'm probably parenting wrong.
No, just right. If your kids are a little terrified, just right. Now, also coming up in just a couple of months here, Free Comic Book Day. Everybody loves May. What can you tease? Is there anything you can tell us about?
Nick, why don't you take this one? I know, again, it's free, but we don't want to give away all that info here. There's some very cool stuff I know that you have planned for that story.
Absolutely. So we have an incredible issue. Our Free Comic Book Day offering this year includes Venom and Spider-Man, and then a little secret all-out Avengers story that Tom Brevoort somehow sneaked into my book. I don't even know how that happened. But the Venom story kicks off so many stories for them. It's Al Ewing, Ram V, an incredible art by Stefano Raffaele. And then we've got our amazing Spider-Man story written by Zeb Wells, drawn by John Romita Jr. that is not only a done-in-one short spider tale, but it lays the thread and kicks off what'll be our big Spider-Man crossover event later in the year. I can't say any more about that, but I am so excited for the greatest day of the year, which is Free Comic Book Day. I know other people have their holidays that their favorite, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, all this stuff. No. Free Comic Book Day, best day of the year, bar none.
That's right. Go out to your local comic book shop, support them while you're there, pick up some comic books. First weekend of May, look out for it for a participating shop because we love our local comic shops. All right, we've got some great fan questions coming in. This one from Jillian B. What is a little known piece of Spider-Man trivia that you particularly love? I love the reaction from both of you. What's yours, Nick?
So as an editor, I know that we make so many mistakes in our comics. And one of my favorite sets of mistakes, I've made plenty in my time, as probably all the fans out there know and are screaming at their screen right now. But some of my favorite are the ones that Stan and Steve and company made in early days when they called Peter Parker Peter Palmer a few times. And they even in the lettering, it even says the name of one of the Distinguished Competitions characters in a balloon in Amazing Spider-Man in the first issues. Amazing.
I love it. What about yours, CB?
Yeah, for me, it's all about kind of, I've wanted to be working comic books since I was a kid. Grew up reading all of the stories. And for me, it's learning a little of the behind the scenes stuff, that we as editors have heard about the editors and the creators that went before, and kind of the the creators that we've worked with and all the little things that go into the books, behind the scenes. The how characters were birthed. Dan gave the example earlier about Spider-Punk. And it's nothing ever goes as planned. I think that's the biggest secret of a lot of what goes into comics, not just Spider-Man comics. And it is a collaboration. It's such a great way for us to make comics and for the creators to have sounding boards for us to bump off of. And no specific example comes to mind, but it's just there is so much fun stuff that goes on behind the scenes that I think that's the magic of comics that people don't realize. It's not coming from one brain. It's not writers versus artists. It's a group effort. I think that's what really makes everything so special as we build the tapestry that is the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, one I'll throw out kind of along those lines, CB, which you just reminded me of, is that Prowler, the original Hobie Brown, who was a Prowler. John Romita Sr. was drawing Spider-Man at the time, and his son, John Romita Jr., another Spider legend, did the first design sketch for Prowler that his dad then refined and turned into the Prowler that we know and love.
Yep. And the other little known fact that I think people tend to forget too is that when the black costume was originally created, that eventually became the costume that was in Secret Wars 8 and then went on to become Venom, the original logo was actually red. So it was a black costume with the red logo. So
there's some good trivia. Nick, it really reminded me, when you talk about how it takes so many people to make comics and it's, such a group, there's so many theater people in comics. And I think it really speaks to what a collaborative art form it is. We also have a question here from Jacob R. How has Spider-Man inspired you all in your everyday lives? And what is your favorite quality of the character?
I think it all boils down to just with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And that the lesson there is also that you don't need to have superpowers to do that. The lesson was always that underneath that mask, even though they're superhuman, there is the human. And, it's been said to death so many times, but everyone through acts of kindness, through little things that they can do in their town or their community, is able to be a hero every day. And it's a lesson that I always took to heart from Spider-Man. And you try to, extend on to not just the fans, but members of my family. And just do little acts of kindness every time I'm at a convention or at a comic book store. Do something for people because they're never going to forget.
That's a great one. Yeah, and for me, it's another one that has been mentioned here earlier. Nobody's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Peter Parker made mistakes. His mistake was the biggest thing that changed his life. For the worse for him and for the best for the world as he became Spider-Man and remember that lesson that Uncle Ben taught him. But that's one of the things that I try to remember and remind my creators, because we have the best creators in the world, but even they need reminders sometimes that the characters have to make mistakes because they have to remind us that we do it. And it's not the mistake that's important. It's what you do after the mistake that is the most important thing. How do you fix it? How do you take that next step?
Yep, well said.
Absolutely. Words to live by all around. Next up, we have a question from Jared in Virginia for Nick. I've noticed recent runs of Amazing Spider-Man have been relatively lighthearted overall. Obviously, had Kindred and a different Sin Eater, but we also had a lot of Boomerang and now the Beyond arc fun. Are there any plans to bring a heavier or darker tone to Spider-Man, either in the current creative team or with a new writer?
Well, I appreciate the question. I was shocked to hear it a little bit because I feel like we've gone super dark sometimes in the past couple of years. But I mean, for me, it's always the balance. Like that's the thing that I love the most about Spider-Man is that you've got really fun stories. They were talking about it before with J.M. DeMatteis, with the fact that he writes these hilarious stories with Frogman and yet then goes to Kraven's Last Hunt. And I know that is our goal. I mean, if you've been reading Beyond, there are some real goofy, really fun ones. But then I think we've got a bunch of moments where you get hit in the gut with an emotional beat that you don't see coming. And that's going to continue. With this new volume, it's definitely funny, but it pushes Peter to some limits that I don't know if he's ever been pushed to. But that my goal is always to find that balance of fun and harrowing, because again, it's all the DNA in Amazing Fantasy 15, the book that kicked off that 60 years ago put us into these seats. You get both of these. You get the mistakes made, you get the tragedy, and you get the transformation of that tragedy and what he does with it. Spider-Man is all of this. That's part of the reason why he is the greatest fictional character ever created, bar none.
And Nick, what you just said about JM can really also apply to Zeb, because at times Zeb is viewed as the funny, goofy writer for things that he's done, in New Warriors and other books. But you forget he did that Doc Ock series, and Zeb has a real dark streak in him when he wants to tell those stories. And if I can plug a little, I just finished Amazing Spider-Man 93 yesterday, the final part, the finished book of the Beyond storyline. And if people want a dark story and they want to see like how far Zeb and you and the whole creative team are going to take things in Amazing Spider-Man going forward, do not miss that issue.
Yep.
It's got a spicy little tease.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this question from Alex in Colorado for CB. Is Spidey ever going to be an Avenger again?
I don't know. Nick here and Tom Brevoort, the Avengers editor, are mortal enemies. We can't even get them in the same room on the same Zoom, let alone agree on anything. But if I can act as a referee between it, I will do my best to see if we can get Spidey on the Avengers again. It's going to be a hard-fought battle. We'll have to talk to Jason Aaron as well, but who knows?
Never going to happen. Last time it was happened, Tom hadn't revealed his identity to everyone on the whole team. Get out of here, Brevoort.
All right, I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one. From Mike in Wisconsin, are we going to see more diversity in Spider-Man? I love Miles Morales and Gwen lines, and I would love to continue to see more diversity, including LGBTQIA plus characters. Any ideas? Any plans?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I love most about the Spider-Verse, which is the correct pronunciation. I heard a bunch of writers talking about it and not pronouncing Spider-Verse correctly. But one of the coolest things about Spider-Man and these multiversal stories is it has given us so many opportunities. Like you said, you mentioned Miles, you mentioned Gwen, with Pavetir Prabhakar, with who's Spider-Man India, Spider-Punk, Hobie Brown, Silk. We have all these characters with all these different backgrounds. Spider-Zero was recently created. We got all these different characters from all these different walks of life. I'm so proud of that. And it still leaves us with plenty of room for growth. And so we're always looking to find new Spider characters who can represent all kinds of walks of life, and be that world outside your window.
Yep, yeah. That's well said, Nick. The Marvel Universe is the world outside your window. And, from the start with what Stan was doing and everything that we've built on since, we're just going to continue to grow and make sure that no matter where you're from or what your background is, that you'll see yourself reflected in multiple characters across not just the Spider-Man universe, but across all the Marvel universe in every book that we publish.
I love that. And I mean, Spider-Man is our ultimate everyman. I think that's why so many of us fell in love with him as a character. Now, we could not end our chat without an announcement. So what news is burning a hole in your pocket that you can share with us?
Well, I think we have a very special announcement, especially for the people who are on the event today. You're all subscribers to the Marvel Universe, to Marvel Unlimited here, and we have been doing a lot recently with Vertical Comics, with the Infinity Comics as we call them. You've seen everything from Jeff the Landshark to all the stuff that Nick was just talking about, spine-tingling Spider-Man, to the Hulkling and Wiccan book that we've been putting out. These are stories that are set in continuity, very important to the continuing myth and the tapestry that we continue to build at Marvel. But, Nick, you want to give them the news?
Absolutely. I would love to, because I think I'm one of the only people who can pronounce it. We have a brand new Infinity comic coming up. It is called Spider-Verse Unlimited. It is a new weekly Spider-Man feature on Marvel Unlimited. It kicks off with a done-in-one story written by Anthony Piper, who recently did the Devil's Reign Spider-Man book, if you've read it, with art by Bruno Oliveira. This time we do talk about Bruno, and colors by Pete Pentazis, and letters by Joe Sabino. It's a fantastic primer for what this with the Spider-Verse Unlimited comic is. We see a Peter Parker story, but we also see shades of that multiverse. coming up right after that is a very Miles-centric story by a writer named Jay Holtham, who currently writes for The Handmaid's Tale, which is, maybe the saddest show on TV, but it's so good. And with art by Nate Stockman. It's got Miles especially, but it also has Peter and Gwen in it, and one of my favorite villains, the Beetle. And after that, we've got all kinds of stuff coming down the road. Would you maybe want to see a little more Silk? Would you want to see a little bit of Penny Parker and her giant robot spider? Would you want to see anything's on the table? You don't know what's going to happen because it is the Spider-Verse.
You never know what's going to happen. Of course, everyone should keep your eyes on Marvel.com and Marvel's social channels for more Spidey news throughout the year. And of course, thank you, Nick. Thank you, CB, so much for hanging out with us and talking about Spider-Man's future.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thanks to all the web heads out there.
Yep. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Evans. Thank you to all the creators who went before us on this too. I love just listening to them talk. I could do that all day. Can we do another couple hours? Who else can we get?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Right after we wrap up.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nick.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Steve.
All right. A huge thanks to all of our creators and editors who joined us tonight. Some just truly amazing stories. And a reminder for all of you at home, be sure to go use that Marvel Insider code before it's gone. Go check your DMs here to see if you won a giveaway tonight. And if you want to learn more about all of the items that we were showing off to give away, definitely check out the giveaways tab here on Hopin for more info. Now, let's see if I can share some winners' names with you. There's some great items coming through. And so shout out to Joshua Z, Nick B, Robert C, Chris C, Jeremy M, Nick L, and John A. There are more winners. They're still being picked. So go check your DMs and make sure that you have not already won. And then, of course, a reminder, go check your email tomorrow for a special treat from Vivi. And for more awesome Spider-Man and other Marvel product, you can always check out Styled by Marvel on Instagram. And of course, continue to follow along at Marvel.com and on Marvel's social channels as we continue to celebrate Spider-Man's 60th anniversary. All right, and remember, we want to hear from you. Share your favorite Spider-Man memories on social media using the hashtag SpideyBeyondAmazing. Wow, what a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lorraine Sink, and this is Marvel, your universe. Whip,